YouTube is
Streaming live.
going. All right, we are all set.
All right, good evening. I am calling us to order for this special board meeting on redistricting at 6:07 p.m. And I will read the land acknowledgement. I can't find my glasses. Okay. The Altadena Library District acknowledges its presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. Altadena is located on the stolen homelands of the Hahamonga tribal land. The traditional territory of the Gabrielino Tongva is referred to as Tavangar, which includes the areas currently known as Los Angeles County, Riverside County, West San Bernardino County, parts of Orange County, as well as the 4 Southern Channel Islands. Entities such as the U.S. government and non-native settlers have subjected the Gabrielino Tongva peoples to historic and continuing injustices, including genocide, forced displacement, and cultural and linguistic erasure. Altadena Library commits to learning, educating, and informing its staff and residents of present-day Altadena about the rich histories, vibrant communities, and cultures of the Gabrielino Tongva people, present and past, through our collection, development, resources, and program offerings. Okay. So next, are there any agenda items that need to be reordered or removed? We only have one. No. Then may I have a motion to approve the agenda? Do we have to do that? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. May I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, great. And then we will do a roll call vote. Trustee Andrews,
Aye.
Trustee Clark,
Aye.
and I vote for me. Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on any non-agenda items?
No public comment at this time.
Okay, all right, awesome. So trustees and those watching at home, the Altadena Library District is embarking on an exciting process of creating districts for future Board of Trustees elections. As part of that process, we are required to have 4 meetings to ensure community awareness, engagement, and participation. This is the second of the 4 meetings. Tonight, we're joined by Kristen Parks of National Demographics Corporation, NDC, to offer us an overview of the districting process. And I'll turn it over to you, Kristen.
Thank you, Camila. I'm going to share my screen here. And I do have a few slides to go through. Again, I am with National Demographics Corporation, and we are the firm hired by the board to assist with the districting process. And as was mentioned, the board did decide in 2019 to transition to a new election system and transition away from the at-large system in which all voters in Altadena Library District boundaries will elect and vote on all members of the board. The transition is to a by-trustee area or district-based, which is perhaps a term we're more familiar with, system. And this election system is one in which voters will be in one trustee area and elect one trustee to the board from their geographic area. The reason for this change is a California state law, which encourages district-based elections and moving away from at-large elections. So this is a good move on the part of the district to avoid potential lawsuits under this law in the future. As mentioned, we are at the second meeting of 4 required under state elections law. And the next meeting should be a little bit more exciting because NDC will be presenting draft maps of proposed trustee areas for the public and the board to review and comment on. That meeting will be on March 25th, which is a Saturday at 10 a.m. And the maps will be posted on the Altadena Library Redistricting Committee website at least 7 days prior. So there's some time for folks to review the maps. The goal here is to have a final map of 5 trustee areas adopted on April 24th. So that will complete the process, and the first election will then be held with the new election system in 2024. As we draw boundaries for the new trustee areas, we do need to comply with federal law. The first thing that we're going to consider is that each trustee area should have a relatively equal population size. Second, we want to make sure that we're in compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, which says that we shall not draw districts that would dilute the vote of protected classes of voters. And finally, we're not going to draw any trustee area boundaries based solely or predominantly on race as the main factor. So those are the federal laws. There's also historically principles that we consider when drawing those boundaries. In addition to population size, we also look at where are neighborhoods or communities of interest. We try to draw districts that are compact and not strange shapes that snake around in ways that may be confusing or illogical to residents of the community. We try to draw districts that are contiguous, which means that each district is one whole part with no disconnected pieces, except of course in the situation where the district itself has a non-contiguous area, which I know the library district does have one. When we draw the boundary lines, we try to follow visible boundaries like roads, creeks or rivers, anything that is going to be easily recognized by the residents of the community. We also want to respect the voters' choices and not necessarily change who is going to be on the board just by the virtue of boundary lines. To some extent, we may consider future growth, but that's relatively uncommon. So once we see draft maps at the next meeting, we can talk about how those draft maps hold up against the rules and goals of the process. So here's the district. According to the 2020 census, the library district has a total population of 43,015 residents, which means that when we draw 5 new trustee areas, each trustee area is going to contain about 8,600 people. We're not looking for exactly 8,603 people. There is wiggle room permissible by law, so there'll be some deviation, but we'll try to minimize it as much as possible. Finally, when we look at the overall district, we can see demographic breakdowns in terms of race, ethnicity, age, and a lot of other variables that come from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey. You can see when we look at households, how many households have children? What is household income? Single family versus multifamily, et cetera. And all of these data points will be available for each proposed trustee area map. We'll break it down by each trustee area. So right now we're seeing just district-wide statistics. Once we have draft maps, one way that we can compare one map to another is by looking at these demographic summary characteristics for each proposed map. So looking at citizen voting age population, we took that data you just saw on the last slide and we're putting it overlaid with a map so that you can see geographically where the different citizens of voting age are by racial and ethnic category. And this helps us to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act by being aware of where these potential voters are. So this map shows Latinos, and it's a heat map. We also have the map for the Black citizens of voting age. And we also have maps showing other socioeconomic demographics that are available on the website in an interactive map. So if any members of the public want to look at any of these data points a little bit more closely, they can zoom in and out and they can select which layer they want to look at. And this can be helpful when we are talking about neighborhoods or communities that we want to keep together within one trustee area. So we can use a variety of demographic characteristics to help identify those communities and where their boundary lines are. When you think of a trustee area or a district, it's really a collection of neighborhoods or communities. And the important choices that we make about boundary lines will determine which neighborhoods and communities are grouped together within each trustee area. So when those draft maps are published prior to our next meeting, they will be available on this online mapping tool. So right now we just have the demographic data, but for the next meeting, we will have the proposed trustee area maps. So folks can use this tool to zoom in and out and see where those boundaries will lie. What you see here now are the blocks designated by the Census Bureau, and those are going to form the basis of the trustee areas. So these blocks that you see here are the smallest geographic area to which we can draw boundary lines. So they will follow those black lines that you see on this map. So as I conclude my presentation, the board will have an opportunity to ask me any clarifying questions, and they will open a public hearing. What's important for the board and members of the public to consider are what are the boundaries in terms of streets or other visible boundaries of the neighborhoods and communities that shouldn't be divided into different trustee areas. So thinking about which communities and neighborhoods do we want to group together, and where might those neighborhood and community boundaries be, because that's an important starting place for building trustee areas. So this is something to consider. And finally, there is a great website up for this districting process. So there's a link to the website. And of course, the website has instructions for how to submit feedback if you are a member of the public. And we encourage everyone to attend or watch the recording of the next public hearing, which will be, again, that Saturday, March 25th. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will welcome any questions from the board.
Are we taking questions now, Kristen?
Yeah, if you have any questions,
Okay.
feel free to ask them. I know at the first meeting, one of the questions from the board was about the historic districts. So that's something that NDC is looking into to make sure that we are not dividing historic areas of Altadena. And so that was a very helpful piece of direction from the board. But any other thoughts that you have or questions can be shared tonight. Of course, we'll be looking for much more of that at the next meeting, but any questions that you have for me, I'm happy to answer. Then you can open a public hearing, and to close out the evening, if you have any additional direction to National Demographics Corporation, you can leave that with me.
Well, my question is, are there any official, official stamps of approval that you get from the county for the districts? In other words, my understanding is that some districts that are drawn by the county are given to a commission that makes sure that there's no gerrymandering going on, or everybody's being included and so on. Do we have a similar process that we go through with the county for certification of this?
No, however, of course, it is the county that will implement the new trustee areas as the county conducts elections. So what we do is we submit the final trustee areas that you, the board, approve. NDC submits all the geographic files to the county registrar of voters. And there is a process where we do quality control checks and communicate if there's any discrepancies with the county. But that is really the final step of the process.
Okay. And then one follow-up to that is that when we were running for election a few years ago, we were able as candidates to get mailing lists from the county of all the registered voters in the district. Will the county offer them, sub-districts, if you will, or the things that we've set up? They'll have the addresses in that separate one that people can use, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a really useful thing to point out too, is that when you are campaigning in this district-based system, you're campaigning within a smaller geographic area. So oftentimes that cost will be reduced.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Trustee Lim or Trustee Clark?
Me? Are you talking to me?
Well, I'll keep going then with my list.
Go
And
for
that
it.
is when I look at your census blocks, I see that they're all in black, the way you talked about. When you make the maps, do you have to simply take these census blocks and get your 8,600 people in pop them? In other words, do you subdivide the census blocks, or do you keep them intact?
We 99% of the time we are keeping the census blocks intact. There are some very specific situations in which we will divide them, but I don't anticipate that being the case for your district. But again, that will be apparent once we start looking at the draft map. So usually, yes, we keep the census blocks intact.
Okay. And then I remember there was a wave of litigation when the laws came out about having this sort of thing apply to different communities, Santa Monica and so on. Does your process then of identifying these districts, getting them set up and so on, does that, if we were challenged legally on that, in your experience, have you had to weather anything like that, or should we be aware of possible challenges to this new system you have?
Yeah, so this is something that certainly your council can advise on, but NDC has decades of experience making these maps, and we've never had a map struck down by a court. And when we advise our clients, we certainly will point out if we do see any potential legal issues. And while the board ultimately will make the final decision, as your consultants, it is our job to advise you as to if we see any potential legal issues. In the Santa Monica case that you reference is of course ongoing, and it is that there are jurisdictions who have been resistant to making this change to district-based elections. So those jurisdictions are the ones that are carefully watching that case. And, there is a potential in the future, depending on the outcome, that some jurisdictions may opt to actually undo their change to district-based elections. But in the immediate term, it's actually very legally wise to adopt district-based elections because given current state law, that is what is encouraged. And if anything, we just expect to see continued and ongoing lawsuits brought against at-large jurisdictions. So you are avoiding that, which is really the key here.
Right, and we do think, I think I'm speaking for the board, that having these districts represented by people who live in them is really a good thing for our district. And then one last question, and that is are there reviews that need, assuming this keeps going on and on, are there periodic reviews to sort of balance the population as we go forward? And when would we expect those to be occurring?
Yeah, these are excellent questions, by the way. Thank you for them. And this is very important to point out is that once these trustee areas are adopted, of course, that's based on the 2020 census. And we know that population is going to change and shift as the community continues to evolve. And so legally, we have to revisit these boundaries. We don't necessarily have to change them, but we have to revisit them after every decennial census. So after the 2030 census, this district will be required to review those trustee areas to see if changes need to be made to bring them back into compliance.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Terry. That was great.
You're welcome.
We ask if there's any public comment questions now, or what's next on the agenda for us?
So we can open up to public comment right now.
Mhm.
I had not received any emails.
Okay.
There are no comments on YouTube.
Okay. Boone, Trustee Lim, are you asking a question? But you're on mute still.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
I see your little mute button is off, but we still can't hear you. Still no.
Boone, what
I see.
sometimes works is if you log out and log back in. Oh,
It's frozen now, huh?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there is.
Boone is asking if he can type.
Yeah, there's a chat. So if you'd like.
And I mean, due to technical difficulties, if he types and I can read his comment into the
Mhm.
record, basically.
Yes. Yes, you can.
Okay, go for it. So Trustee Lim has a question on the proposed boundaries. They ask, are there any at the moment? Did I miss that in the package with outlines?
So the answer is no. We're actually required to hold 2 public hearings prior to the release of any proposed boundaries. So you will see those next month, and they will be released at least 7 days prior to the March 25th meeting.
Thank you, Kristen.
I did have one more question that I forgot, and I think we might have covered it before, actually. Tell me if I'm repeating it. But that is there an opportunity to get our district sort of looking like the town council districts as well, or will they be totally different looking?
I need to look at the town council districts, but they will be totally different because there is a different there are, I believe, like 12
Yeah. there's-
town council members, and there's only 5 members of the Board of Trustees. So population wise, those are not going to align. But it is a question that we commonly hear asked, because the district itself is the same external boundaries.
Right, yeah, as you were saying it, I remember that we had covered this in the last meeting too, so thank you for that.
Yeah, there's 8 census tracts and there's 2 members from each tract on town council.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. So trustee Lim also asked, with the legal process, is there a possibility of an at-large seat? i.e., what happens if no one runs in a district?
Yeah, it wouldn't. Well, so as this transition occurs, you will continue to all of you now were elected at large. So there will continue to be at large, and then it's a rollout process. So in the 2024 election, we're not electing all 5 members of the board. So the trustee areas will take a couple election cycles for the entire board to transition. However, if there is a vacancy on the board, usually then there is an appointment process to fill that vacancy. And depending on whether or not that trustee area, has transitioned to the, away from the at-large, I guess it will have, then you would need to appoint someone who resides within that trustee area. Yeah, that's sort of one of those unlikely situations, but it's a question that we hear a lot, especially in smaller jurisdictions.
Thank you, Kristen. Trustee Lim, are you typing another question? Okay. So trustee Lim says, so what I am hearing is that if no one runs, the appointment must come within the new district. That is correct.
Yes, that's correct.
We have additional questions? No? Okay. All right, and confirming, Catalina, no questions from the public?
No questions from the public. So if you would
Okay.
like to open up a formal public hearing, you may do so.
And what do I need to do for that? I would like to open up a formal public hearing.
Yes.
A formal public hearing is now open. And then how long do we wait before we then close it, because we don't have folks on YouTube watching?
Since we have nobody who's joined on YouTube or who has submitted comment through our email or otherwise, you may close the public hearing if you wish.
Thank you very much, Catalina. As we have no questions from the public, either on this Zoom call or via YouTube, we will go ahead and close the public comment or public hearing section now. Thank you very much. And then I thank you very much for your presentation, Kristen. And we look forward to chatting with you before our March 25th meeting to plan for that. And the next meeting, as Kristen said in the presentation, will be March the 25th at 10 a.m. That will be live at the library, and all of you are welcome to come, those who may be watching or will watch this later. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Thanks for having
Thank you.
all of our questions.
Thanks,
Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Have a good night. Okay, then we can move on to the next section. Are there any announcements and planning, any proposal of future agenda items? No? All right. Then may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. So we will go ahead and adjourn at 6:37 p.m. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks, Camila.
Thank you, Camila.
Bye, everybody.